Monster Hunter Wilds has long been anticipated not just by the core fanbase, but by the wider gaming community as a whole. And judging by those disgustingly high sales numbers, it's safe to say that Monster Hunter Wilds is an overwhelming success. Yet beneath the roar of towering beasts and the crackling embers of campfires underneath an endless sky, a shadow lingers. Whispers of doubt and waves of negativity that refuse to fade. For many, it's not about clinging to the past. It's the sense that something essential has been lost, that this isn't just change, but a step in the wrong direction. How can a game so massive, so seemingly beloved, still leave so many players conflicted? Let's explore those reasons that divide us and linger over every conversation about To understand why Wilds is such a divisive entry in the Monster Hunter franchise, let's start by breaking it down into the main topics that have people up in arms. First, we'll look at the game itself, its story, the locales, the monster roster, and the combat. Afterward, we'll examine the fluff of Monster Hunter Wilds. Fluff being what I call the charm and goofiness of Monster Hunter added via small but highly impactful features. And finally, the events surrounding the game's launch, which are just as relevant to this discussion as the game itself, in my humble opinion. While it's important to not overly focus on the negatives and to appreciate the many genuinely amazing aspects of Monster Hunter Wilds, it's equally crucial to acknowledge the concerns the community has raised. We owe it to ourselves and to the future of the franchise not to let Capcom believe that all their practices are acceptable, no matter how much we love these games. Oh, also, spoiler warning, I'll be talking about the entire game. Now, I get it. A lot of people are tired of listening to the negativity, and to be honest, so am I. This script was written way back in mid-March prior to Title Update 1, but due to some external reasons, I wasn't able to upload this video sooner. However, I have amended some parts to take into account the changes made by Title Update 1. So please forgive me for beating a most likely dead Gypceros. Alright, with that out of the way, and with you hopefully willing to hear me out, let's get into... Let's begin with the story. Many people believe that aside from the story being rushed, it also just does not fit into Monster Hunter's setting. But what exactly is meant by that? To explain a little more about that issue, let's take a look at the setting we are currently operating in. Monster Hunter's setting is a unique one, as it revolves around the reverence of life, nature, and coexistence with a world that wants to force you into a food chain to the best of its ability. It is a post-apocalypse not set a few years after the collapse, but rather millennia after the downfall of the world. To survive in this world means to either live in one of the kingdoms born from the ruins of civilizations past, ignorant to the horrors beyond their walls, or to be nothing more but prey to the beasts lurking beyond the warm light of the torches of one's village, far removed from any major settlement, except for a select few. These select few are the Hunters, the hammer of the guild, an extra-governmental organization that essentially does everything from researching in all avenues, be it scientific advancements or the study of monster anatomies, to the production of goods to facilitate their work. Hunters are more commonly found on the frontiers of civilization, in fringe villages in need of aid, and such, their roles and responsibilities are well known all around. They work to balance nature, aid in research, and defend those who cannot defend themselves from monsters for the most part. This has been the status quo for every game prior to Monster Hunter Wilds. But Wilds takes a different narrative approach. In previous games, your role as a hunter, maintaining the balance of nature and protecting frontier villages, was a given. The world accepted it, and so did the people who lived under guild supervision for years. Now, however, you're confronted with an entirely new perspective. You're introduced to uncontacted tribes who have no knowledge of the guild's mission or the role of a hunter, and thus partially experience the story through the eyes of someone who cares not for any of the guild's tenets. These people don't see monsters as part of a fragile ecosystem that needs balancing. Instead, they view them as relentless predators to be avoided or to be warded off. This is the change in perspective that Wilds confronts us with. The guild's mission to be the shepherds of nature against the desperate fight for survival of these remote tribes. Set in what is likely an uncharted area of the Funron continent, the story begins with an expedition of guild members rescuing a child from a supposedly uninhabited area. That child, Nata, reveals that there is a people living deep within these forbidden lands, who have been attacked by a monster thought to be extinct. With this revelation, you travel to in search of Nata's people. Along the way, you discover that these uninhabited lands are very much inhabited. In fact, they're home to multiple tribes. As you help these people fend off monsters and search for Nata's village, you begin uncovering evidence of an ancient civilization's involvement in the very formation of all the biomes found in this area. A mysterious white, milky substance construct known as the land spine appears throughout every locale, seemingly connected to the inclemencies, the dangerous and transformative weather conditions unique to these lands. Following this land spine back to its origins, eventually you reach the ruins of Wyveria, an ancient city that fell 1,000 years ago under unknown circumstances. Here you find Nata's people living within Rathalos' walls, which he, understandably, isn't thrilled about.
He's in the walls. He's in the goddamn walls!
To make matters weirder, this Rathalos, and many other monsters, are covered in Wilk. What exactly is going on here? Turns out, the ancient civilization of Wyveria had created artificial life and used monsters as guardians to protect their innovations. But that civilization is long gone, leaving the guardians to run amok for 1,000 years, powered by something called the Dragon Torch, an ancient energy source that helped the people of Wyveria terraform the Forbidden Lands and even defy gravity. Like, what the fuck? Why is that glossed over? This is gravity manipulation in a mainline Monster Hunter game. Where are the Gogarth twins, Capcom? Eventually, you track down Arkveld, the monster that destroyed Nata's village. You find it decimating countless guardian creatures, gorging itself on their carcasses like a starving devil Joe. After having to talk down Nata, who for some reason now decides that Arkveld is just like him for real, you kill the White Wraith and look for a way to end the madness. In one of the most badass scenes in Monster Hunter history, your hunter declares their intent to destroy the corruption at the heart of it all, allowing for the continued existence of the artificial biomes and the tribes that took root in them. That marks the end of the low-rank story. And honestly, for a first attempt at putting the story front and center, it's pretty damn great. The characters aren't one-dimensional. Even Nata, a child, you know, the little goblins that usually annoy the audience in every story they take part in, is actually pretty great. He starts as a vengeful, impulsive and scared child and grows into someone who understands the value of life and balance in the ecosystem, which are core themes in every Monster Hunter game. Every character has depth. I still don't know how to pronounce that word. And for longtime fans, there are familiar faces too. Fabius, the Ace Lancer from 4 Ultimate, and Gemma, the blacksmith from the same game. A real treat for the veterans. However, the 4 Ultimate callbacks don't stop there. As with most Monster Hunter games, the low rank story is just the first act. High rank continues the narrative or sometimes introduces a new arc altogether. In Wilds, it's mostly the latter, although there are some threads that connect both ranks. In high rank, you begin investigating sightings of frenzied monsters while tracking down Arkveld, now infected with a more refined version of the frenzy virus. During this mission, we get one of the hardest cutscenes in the franchise. This scene had me creaming my jorts. A guild knight was nearly killed, a pack of Nursilla appeared, and then snap! Yet another neck is broken by none other than Gore Magala. He really likes doing that, doesn't he? I wish I had more to say about this part of the story though, but that's pretty much the highlight of the high rank. Sadly, there's not much else to say. The frenzied monsters show up with little build-up, Gore is used mainly as a plot device to justify chasing Arkveld again, and there's no real sign of Arkveld's infection outside of characters telling us it's aggressive. So, aside from the high rank story feeling tacked on, what about this plot has people up in arms? It seems solid, doesn't it? One of the most common complaints I've seen is that the story feels rushed. Capcom seems so eager to present their narrative that they've forgotten to let players take their time, soak in the world, and proceed at their own pace. Unlike previous games, where even brief excursions into an area were balanced out by returning to them repeatedly through a variety of optional quests, such as mining ores, stealing wyvern eggs, or hunting monsters for unique clients, restricts your interaction with each area. You complete a handful of quests, see only a fraction of the area, and then move on permanently. In some cases, access to previous locales is restricted without explanation, truly railroading you into the story. While some criticisms about the rushed pacing are valid, I believe this is Capcom's first true attempt at a fully engrossing story mode, and these flaws reflect growing pains. A few more quests per locale would have gone a long way. For example, Werner accidentally causing a problem in the Olwell Basin could have opened up deeper exploration. Likewise, the Dushagama invasion of Kunafa village shouldn't have just displaced the livestock, it could have scattered villagers who were then in need to be saved, or it could have led to us aiding in the rebuilding of the village via gathering quests. Another major criticism revolves around whether the story fits into Monster Hunter setting at all. This concern is largely directed at the Guardian monsters and the reveal of Voiveria. Many players argue that these artificially created creatures feel too futuristic or magical for Monster Hunter's traditionally low-tech world. Zoshia, in particular, a canonized version of the previously speculative equal dragon weapon, is cited as a step too far. Others, however, argue that such advanced tech isn't out of place. Longtime fans point to Arshan armor sets, the Wyvern Demolisher cannons, Dragonators, gunlances, and even the ancient civilizations hinted at throughout the entire series as precedent. Personally, I've been an equal dragon weapon shell since Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, so I'm in the latter camp. Honestly, I even think the version we got in Zoshia is a little too safe. The Angel Devil motif is nice, but I would have preferred the grotesque, stitched together, bastardized form of a hunter in Rathalos armor design from the original concept art. At least, some of that legacy lives on in the Arkveld armor. And speaking of Arkveld, a personal gripe I have is that Arkveld, for how important it is to the story, feels simply too absent. It shows up like 4 to 5 times in the story, one of which merely being a cutscene. It is more spoken about rather than shown, like the hunter is always too late to witness Arkveld's shenanigans. One of the more puzzling debates in the community is the actual size of the monster roster. Wilds boasts 29 monsters in its base game, which is about average for a Monster Hunter title. However, some argue the number is inflated. Guardian Arkveld is effectively the exact same as Flying Wyvern Arkveld, only to never return after the story and doesn't even drop unique items. Zoshia, while a one-time fight, also lacked unique items pre-TU1. Guardian versions of Teshagma and Rathalos are also dismissed by some as mere reskins. So depending on who you ask, the real count is anywhere from 25 to 29. I personally agree that Guardian Arkveld shouldn't be counted, but Zoshia and the Guardian versions of Teshagma and Rathalos deserve inclusion. Not only do they feature different movesets from their base forms, but they also have unique armor and weapons. If we start discounting monsters with altered movesets, then subspecies, variants, and deviants wouldn't count either, and that's clearly not the standard used in past games. That leads directly into one of the most discussed aspects of the game: the combat. There's near unanimous agreement that the combat has gotten even better than before due to the weapons feeling more responsive thanks to the focus mode and offering new moves, but also significantly easier. The monsters go down too quickly, committing to attacks carries fewer risks, frenzied monsters have too little health, although that may just be a bug, and meaningful challenge is limited almost exclusively to the furthest reaches of the endgame. Sure, there are players who disagree, and if you look at monsters like Tempered Gormagala, you would be tempted to agree with them. But that fight is arguably the only real test in the base game for the average player. And yes, I do mean the average player. Gormagala is essentially the last hurdle before post-launch content begins. A game that doesn't regularly engage its audience will lose that audience more surely than a game that dangles the carrot of achieving a hard-fought victory in front of their eyes. Hell, the YouTuber Gaijin Hunter made a small video that showed how at baseline, meaning a 3 strength monster, which is denoted by those purple little stars above any given free roaming monster, every monster is dealing a lot less damage than monsters even in Rise, the game widely criticized for being way too easy. Now that mantle cannot even be held by Rise anymore. And damage output of your soon-to-be pants aside, even crafting was streamlined to such a level it is laughable. Let me elaborate. In past games, you would have to hunt a single monster multiple times to get a certain piece of gear. This, at times, would even include items from other monsters and things like fish or rare ores. Now you may say, hey, the same applies to things like Zoshia in Wilds. But that's exactly the problem. It's just endgame monsters that require you to get items from other monsters. I'm talking about low rank gear here, not the endgame. So at times, the games would unlock a new armor set for you that you couldn't craft until later down the line due to requiring items from other monsters. Some might call this needless tedium, and at times I would agree. However, this made you rethink your progression. You had to more carefully select which weapons to forge and adjust your hunts accordingly. I managed to craft full armors after one hunt, and I didn't even think of upgrading my gear with armor spheres or carefully hunting until Tempered Gormagala and hiring Zoshia respectively. Some defenders respond with common refrains like low rank has always been easy, you've just gotten better, or try a new weapon, and various other variations of these statements. And these are factually untrue. Let's look at the first of these statements. Low rank has always been easy. No, low rank was easier, not easy. There's a difference, and even if that were the truth, one should want this to be adjusted so the difficulty is more evenly distributed across the entire game with regularly interspersed difficulty spikes, not just content gated to the very end of the game. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the Monster Hunter equivalent of a kangaroo on crack, Great Macau. This raptor is one of the first challenges you meet in Monster Hunter Generations and is far more out to literally jump your ass than any other monster you'll meet after it. And beyond this actually real Australian animal, trust me bro, you'll always hear of people having had walls in previous games that took them multiple attempts to beat. Hell, for a more recent example, people often cite Anjanath or Tobi Kadachi as their own walls, or even HR49 Kirin. For some others, it may just be low rank Rise Kezu.
If you like that game, you like bad games, just admit it.
You've just gotten better. Of course, you'll naturally improve at Monster Hunter after playing previous games, but the game itself should teach you, gradually increasing the skills you need to master as you go, and punishing you for overextending, not preparing properly, or being too reckless. It shouldn't be a requirement to have that prior experience to succeed in the current game. I've seen far too many players, for instance, charge right in front of a tempered Gormagala while it's preparing one of its breath attacks, completely unaware of the danger because the game didn't guide them to understand those mechanics. It shouldn't let you mindlessly button mash until you hit a brick wall with Gormagala. That doesn't teach you anything about positioning, reading attack patterns, or proper preparation. Try a new weapon. I did. I mained Lance for the first time in all my years of playing Monster Hunter, and it was still a cakewalk. What else do you want me to try? Bow? Mind you, it is not just about the combat itself. The food in is also just straight up stronger. You don't have to upgrade it. You immediately get maxed out health and stamina with nothing but positive effects. While that allows you to enjoy the hunt more, as you can take more of a punch and thus can play more aggressively if you so desire, it also incentivizes just clicking until the monster dies, as you don't have to be so careful. Back in the day, we had to go into the mines to get better food. The mines! One last thing I want to mention in terms of combat is how often monsters get staggered or stunned due to wounds. Wounding is definitely a better system than Worldborn's tenderizing, as it happens automatically through repeatedly hitting the same spot and doesn't require you to halt what you're doing to latch onto the monster, which could just end with you getting hit and falling off. Yeah, I think you can see the issue here. No need to be a Kazi to sniff that one out. Nevertheless, the number of wounds and staggering does seem somewhat excessive with the baseline monsters, as they already drop dead by just looking at them slightly wrong. The wounds do seem to be balanced better in newer content with HR Zoshia and Mizutsune, because those two got hands. But according to a portion of players, these wounds are just too versatile. They increase damage and can stagger monsters, or in some cases even topple them, opening up a monster to get absolutely bodied by the entire team. Personally, I enjoyed the system, but I can understand how it could make monsters feel like they can't fight back. One thing I do not enjoy is the locales, and more specifically, how we experience them. Earlier I mentioned how doesn't let you take your time and smell the roses, and it's one of the things I've seen mentioned more than I expected. The vast distances between your target locations and yourself encourage you to just press the autopilot button for your secret and wait until you arrive. And while that may not seem like a problem on the surface, I want you to cast your mind back to Monster Hunter Rise and the Palamutes. The maps were also pretty goddamn large, but still followed the corridor to battle arena setup for every locale. However, due to the mere existence of mounts, the corridors had to be made longer to justify the inclusion of the mounts. To quote a really dumb line from Family Guy, it insists upon itself. Sorry, it's a dumb quote, I know. Larger maps require mounts because some players may get annoyed having to manually navigate everywhere, which then requires the map to be large enough to justify the inclusion of a mount. Without these stretches of open space, you'd essentially be able to run down every monster non-stop, which isn't exactly how Monster Hunter generally wants you to hunt. So now there are more areas that are larger than your regular corridors, but too small or too crowded for a monster to be in. See Gammoth, or the lack thereof. It's like deciding to go into the Louvre, but instead of taking your time and actually looking at everything, you had a guy cart you around in a golf cart at Mach Fuck only to throw you out on the other side. Sure, you're technically seeing everything, but you're not actually experiencing anything. There's fluff there to make the world feel more alive and to give room for the insane amount of detail the devs put so much love into creating. But there's just so much needless space now. Orienting yourself has become difficult, and because we are now incentivized to use mounts, we simply don't remember the map layout, except for the fighting arenas. It's a shame, because areas like the Oil Well Basin and Wyveria are such cool, novel locale ideas. And, I mean, look at the Scarlet Forest! And then there are the inclemencies. These environmental states, designed to introduce danger and atmosphere, mostly just apply annoying visual filters. The fallow and the inclemency periods outnumber the plenty period, making the maps frequently look drab and washed out. What's the point of all the beautiful art direction if it's constantly obscured by a gray filter? Genuinely, what are these glorified weather systems even for? They were advertised as times of increased threat, where dangerous monsters might appear. But outside of apexes, who aren't particularly threatening, the inclemencies do very little. The sand tide lightning rarely if ever hits the player. The Scarlet Forest flooding just slows you down slightly, which can admittedly actually mess you up. Were the monsters actually aggressive enough to capitalize on said inconvenience? And I can't even tell what the Ishard Cliffs or Vivarius inclemencies are supposed to be doing. They mostly just dampen the visual appeal of an otherwise stunning game. Thankfully, visuals were never the main thing that we came to Monster Hunter for. We came to Monster Hunter to enjoy a unique experience provided by the aforementioned fluff that always permeates the Monster Hunter games. In that sense, this game is truly at an impasse. On one hand, the actual ecological fluff has been maxed out of its gourd, with each locale, each monster, endemic life, and small monsters having vast amounts of deep interactions and behaviors. But on the other hand, since the latter half of the 4th generation, the goofy side of the fluff has started to wane more and more, with the hunter no longer being a village hero, with the exception of Base Rise. This has caused the immersive feeling that those who engage with the quest descriptions felt to slowly be phased out as you have started to become more of a guild agent rather than an up-and-coming new hunter following that profession to help their village. And this has reached a fever pitch with quest descriptions are now copied and pasted descriptions that only change some words. This is either a genius way of showing how disconnected the guild is from real life or just a lazy design decision. Or how about the lack of player housing? In the past, we always got a place to call home that always carried a sense of identity, be it the lodge-like mountain home of Pucka Village or the very, I honestly don't know how to call it, the hot spring-inspired Yukomo Village house or the grandiose look of the World house. Now what do we have? A preparation tent. Though admittedly, being able to play with your cat in it is absolutely peak and you're able to customize it somewhat, sadly lacking significant changes that could give your dingy tent some sense of personality behind a paywall. And worst of all, pet placements, something players overwhelmingly loved in Monster Hunter World, is now gone too. What is the point of capturing them? To have them shown in our field log? And what is the point of showing these animals in a list? We have a list already, and worst of all, we can't keep the baby secrets. By God, that has to be some sort of blasphemy. Alright. I get that may not be the biggest concern for people in terms of fluff. So how about the lack of quest variety? We only have hunting quests. The Monster Hunter community at large could tell endless stories of the Wyvern Egg quests that always ended with mysterious boulders blocking your way while you were being hunted by a Rathalos and or a Rathian. This was like a rite of passage. Everyone had an egg quest story. They were infamous. These usually had to be done to upgrade your canteen, but as you may have noticed, we don't have a canteen anymore. We have a barbecue spit that can cook things, sure, but getting ingredients is obnoxious and cats aren't cooking anymore. That was like the best thing about canteens. So not only do you not have the joy of seeing the food that you vacuum into your gullet get better and better as you progress, you don't even get to pick cat hairs out of it anymore. And why in hell do we need tickets to eat at the gathering hub? Just let us eat! Goddamn! At launch, we didn't even have a gathering hub, the one place that usually just oozes with the culture of the place you're currently in. Instead, players were forced into a base camp that crashed their performance and at times, their games. Oh, and while we are still here, what is the point of Scudflies now? In World, they at least had the purpose of highlighting tracks to, you know, hunt down the monster. Now, they aren't really needed as the sacred just guides you towards it, and even if you don't use the sacred to hunt down your target, which is what I have started doing, You have an icon that constantly displays where the monster currently is. So even guiding you to the monster is not that needed anymore. All they do now is highlight an absurd amount of items that come your way. Why take away the tracking aspect of hunting the monster? I get that people want to get to the action, but that can be accomplished by lessening the size of the maps instead of removing a core part of the Monster Hunter experience, a part that really adds to the vibes of Monster Hunter. These are steps backward, not forward as the franchise has usually done. So how did we get here? How did the community become so entrenched in their respective takes on the quality of the game? Expectations. See, I like to jokingly refer to the Monster Hunter community as a cult. Our charismatic leaders over at Capcom keep us hooked with promises of diving back into this incredible world. We act like evangelists, preaching the gospel of Monster Hunter to anyone who hasn't played yet with a fervor that borders on religious obsession. And we try to keep the community positive and welcoming to all. With that kind of energy behind it, Wilds was being lauded as the biggest Monster Hunter ever. A game of such ambition and scale that no one, not even longtime fans, could have dreamed of it. Monster Hunter World already brought the series into the mainstream. Now, Wilds was poised to push the franchise to even greater heights. So much so that other developers even delayed their releases to avoid clashing with it. To properly give context to how we got this division, let's rewind to the reveal. Monster Hunter Wilds was first announced during the Game Awards 2023. Most of us were left wondering what exactly we were watching. You probably remember the sight of a massive Ceratonoth herd, larger than any herbivore group we'd seen in the past. Then came the pack monsters, not only hunting the hunter, but actively interacting with every Ceratonoth in the scene. That alone would have been jaw-dropping, but didn't stop there. It also introduced dynamic weather, the inclemencies, which transformed the environment, making it more dangerous or more fruitful. The community was going well. As things progressed, cracks started to appear. When the PC system requirements dropped, red flags were raised. Steam's recommended specs have always been a reliable gauge for launch optimization, and based on what we saw, yeah, that looked like pure Gargoyle dung. This sparked immediate concern across the community. Would the game actually be polished at launch? Are these specs just temporary, and will they actually be improved? The debate between those who saw the writing on the wall and those who hoped for better got so heated that Capcom had to publicly reassure players that the last months of development would focus on optimization. That helped somewhat. We all remember the beta, released as a network stress test. It surprised us with the reveal of a new origami-themed monster type, but reactions to the beta were so overwhelmingly negative that, according to rumors, Capcom had to shift priorities internally, focusing more heavily on performance. This, in addition to most likely feeling pressure from their shareholders to present some sales numbers before the fiscal quarter ended, led to several key features being cut from the launch version of the game, including the Gathering Hub and Arena quests, and leaving several skills to be broken at launch. Even with reassurances, criticism remained. Prominent YouTubers called it an optimization disaster. Disheartening, especially considering Capcom had once claimed that they were transitioning into a PC-first studio. So much for that. Capcom did eventually release a benchmark tool to help players test whether their systems could run the game. That was great, on paper. In reality, the benchmark tool included full cutscenes in the FPS calculations, which inflated performance results. A player might see a 62 FPS average and think they were good to go, only to experience a much worse reality in actual gameplay. That's not just disappointing, it's somewhat misleading. And that still yet excludes the expectations of long-term fans of the series, which is a categorization I include Monster Hunter World fans in. A genuine fear I have noticed in the community is the fact that Monster Hunter is starting to change into something those who subscribe to the idea of what Monster Hunter has been in the past do not want. It is turning into what people who share these concerns like to call Monster Fighter. I count myself as part of that subsection of the community, but to a lesser extent. I like the tedium and clunkiness. I like the tedium and clunkiness of the older games. I like the hunting aspect, not just the fighting aspect. I hear people in the community constantly saying that World players are now experiencing what old gen players felt with World. And while I am an old gen player who started with Freedom Unite, I felt like World was the pinnacle of the hunting fantasy. You actually tracked down the monster. You hunted it. no matter how often I had to do it. Everything from preparing for the hunt to actually reaching the monster and killing it, I enjoyed every second. And is taking away even that. Many people may call this gatekeeping or not getting with the modernization, and that the tedium was just system restrictions. But it's none of that. It is simply a concern that what made the series is being stripped away instead of being reinforced and improved upon. The ballooning expectations of the community, the somewhat misleading way the PC community was led into a false sense of security in regards to the performance and the overall feeling that Wilds would iterate on World and deliver more features and not less, caused customers to feel a sense of betrayal that exploded due to the vast expectations that were not entirely the community's fault not being met. And so, even with all the things Monster Hunter Wilds gets right, and there are many, it still finds itself at the center of a heated divide. It's a game of unmatched ambition and undeniable innovation, but also one hampered by performance issues, unclear communication, and questionable decisions. Yet, despite this divide, Monster Hunter Wilds still yet managed to be an amazing experience of enviable proportions and will only get better from here. So with this last section in this video, I want to make an appeal to you all. Wilds has flaws, every Monster Hunter does, and we should acknowledge these flaws instead of blindly excusing them. But do not let out your frustrations on your fellow hunter. Monster Hunter is a community, not just any random game. It is a game that thrives on cooperation, not hostility, and none of us want to see this community burn itself down. We have longsword users for that.